Long before recorded history, long before kingdoms and empires as we know them, the earth was said to be ruled by beings whose knowledge, power, and presence surpassed anything humans could imagine. These first rulers, sometimes called gods, walked among early humans, teaching, guiding, and shaping civilization from its very foundation. They introduced laws, governance, agriculture, architecture, and crafts, embedding wisdom and order into the daily lives of mortals. Every city, every temple, every system of knowledge reflected their influence, ensuring that human society could survive, thrive, and evolve under their watchful guidance. Their teachings were not merely practical, they were moral, spiritual, and cosmic, blending the earthly with the celestial, forging a legacy that would echo through generations and leave an indelible mark on the course of humanity. The first rulers, according to ancient texts, did not originate from Earth in the same way humans did. They arrived from realms beyond human comprehension, descending from the heavens in radiant vessels that shone like stars against the night sky. These beings brought with them knowledge, authority, and power far surpassing that of early mankind. They were immortal or possessed lifespans so vast that centuries passed for humans like fleeting moments for them, allowing them to witness the slow evolution of human society while subtly guiding its course. Their arrival was not chaotic, it was deliberate, a calculated intervention intended to shape the destiny of a fledgling species. Humans, fragile and scattered, were immediately aware of their extraordinary nature. The first rulers were not merely powerful, they embodied perfection in ways that seemed divine, reflecting forms, strength, and intelligence far beyond mortal capacity. Despite their otherworldly essence, the first rulers interacted directly with humans, teaching, observing, and influencing society on every level. They instructed early humans in agriculture, showing them how to cultivate the land and domesticate animals, transforming survival into stability. Humans learned to sow crops in alignment with seasonal cycles, irrigate barren plains, and preserve surplus food, knowledge that allowed settlements to flourish. Metallurgy was another gift, revealing the secrets of extracting metals from ore, crafting tools, and forging weapons that gave humans an unprecedented edge over nature. Some ancient accounts even suggest that the first rulers conducted experiments on early humans, enhancing intelligence and physical capabilities, creating a hybrid form of partnership between mortals and their celestial mentors. Humans became both students and collaborators in a grand design, their lives intertwined with the intentions of beings whose wisdom surpassed comprehension. The Sumerian records describe a complex hierarchy among the first rulers, suggesting that not all of them shared the same purpose or disposition. Some were benevolent, guiding humanity with patience and care, while others enforced order through strict control, testing the loyalty and obedience of their charges. Rivalries among the rulers themselves had tangible consequences on Earth, affecting fertility, climate, and the prosperity of human communities. These conflicts were often mirrored in the myths and legends that humans recorded, representing the struggle between forces beyond their understanding. Yet, through these tensions, humanity was shaped, learning to adapt to both favor and wrath, to cultivate ingenuity under pressure, and to understand the subtle influence of power wielded by those beyond mortal reach. In addition to practical instruction, the first rulers introduced humans to abstract concepts that would define civilization. They taught early humans about law, morality, and governance, establishing the foundations of social structure. Kings, priests, and elders were modeled after the hierarchy of these rulers, reinforcing the notion that leadership was divinely sanctioned. Religious practices, rituals, and mythologies often centered on their presence, embedding the first rulers into the spiritual fabric of early societies. Humanity's understanding of order, ethics, and justice was intertwined with their guidance, creating a civilization that reflected the intelligence and authority of beings who walked among them. Their lessons extended beyond mere survival, encompassing philosophy, astronomy, and the arts, ensuring that humans could continue to progress even in the absence of direct supervision. The first ruler's influence was not limited to tangible knowledge. it permeated culture, art, and collective memory. Humans depicted their benefactors in carvings, statues, and ceremonial sites, attempting to capture both their form and essence. Temples and sacred spaces were constructed to honor these beings, aligning with stars and celestial phenomena, as if mirroring the ruler's cosmic origins. Humans observed and recorded celestial events under their instruction, creating calendars, predicting eclipses, and charting constellations with precision. These early acts of astronomy and science were not mere curiosity, they were tools given by the first rulers to harmonize humanity with the cosmos, to understand time, seasons, and celestial patterns in ways that would sustain civilization for millennia. Conflict, however, was always a part of their presence. Ancient narratives speak of divine disputes that echoed through human society. Some rulers sought dominance over others, testing humanity's ability to obey, resist, or mediate. Human leaders, often chosen or guided by the first rulers, became intermediaries, tasked with maintaining balance and carrying out orders that were often beyond comprehension. These struggles were formative, forging early concepts of diplomacy, negotiation, and societal cohesion. Humanity was caught between forces of authority and ambition, learning the consequences of obedience and defiance, while observing the vast intelligence and power of beings who moved through their world with confidence and purpose. Even in moments of absence, the shadow of the first rulers remained. Their teachings, structures, and laws persisted, forming the bedrock of civilization long after their physical presence faded. Humans continued to interpret their legacy, passing down knowledge, rituals, and myths from generation to generation. Temples, ziggurats, and monuments stood as silent testimony to a time when gods walked among men, a reminder that the first rulers had left not just lessons but a blueprint for civilization itself. Humanity's earliest triumphs, whether in agriculture, governance, or architecture, were inseparable from their guidance. The earth itself became a reflection of their order, a living testament to beings whose wisdom and power had indelibly shaped the destiny of mankind. The first rulers were not mere observers of early human existence. They became the architects of society, transforming scattered nomadic tribes into structured communities with laws, rituals, and systems of survival. They taught humans how to settle in one place, cultivating the land to create sustainable food sources, and directing the construction of settlements that were far more advanced than anything humans could have devised on their own. Mud huts evolved into permanent dwellings, and villages grew into organized cities with temples, administrative centers, and marketplaces, each carefully planned to reflect both utility and divine design. The first rulers demonstrated how to align structures with celestial movements, showing that the heavens and earth were intertwined, and that the order of the cosmos could guide the order of human life. Irrigation and agriculture were cornerstones of their guidance, as they instructed humans on the precise ways to control water, prevent flooding, and channel rivers into fertile fields. Lands that were once barren or unpredictable became productive, capable of supporting populations far larger than ever before. The knowledge of planting cycles, crop rotation, and soil management allowed humans to move from subsistence to surplus, transforming communities into centers of growth and stability. The first rulers demonstrated these techniques directly, supervising early works, correcting errors, and introducing methods to maximize efficiency while maintaining harmony with natural forces. Metallurgy and toolmaking were equally important, as the first rulers revealed how to extract metals from ore, refine them, and craft instruments for agriculture, construction, and protection. Copper, gold, and bronze became symbols of authority and divine favor, while the creation of weapons allowed humans to defend themselves and expand territories. The first rulers taught not only the technical processes, but the principles of quality, precision, and durability, instilling a respect for materials and craftsmanship that became a cultural foundation. Through these lessons, humans developed professions and social roles that reflected the influence of their teachers, creating guilds, workshops, and artisan communities under the guidance of celestial mentorship. Trade and economic systems were another domain where the first rulers left their mark, instructing humans to exchange goods and ideas between settlements. They introduced the concept of measurement, record-keeping, and fair exchange, enabling early markets to function as centers of social and cultural interaction. Trade routes emerged under their guidance, linking distant communities and spreading both material wealth and knowledge. These networks were not merely practical. They reinforced human cooperation, interdependence, and organization, reflecting the larger principles of order and governance taught by the first rulers. Astronomy and the observation of the heavens were among their most transformative teachings. As humans learned to track the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, calendars were developed, agricultural cycles were planned with precision, and rituals were timed to celestial events. Temples and monuments were constructed in alignment with stars, eclipses, and solstices, ensuring that human activity was connected with the rhythms of the cosmos. The first rulers taught that understanding the universe was essential for survival and growth, revealing patterns and cycles that humans could use to anticipate natural phenomena, plan settlements, and maintain order within society. Social organization and governance were structured under their influence, as humans learned to create hierarchical systems reflecting the authority of the first rulers. Kings, priests, and councils were appointed with principles of loyalty, justice, and responsibility derived from celestial models. Laws were codified and enforced, rituals formalized, and responsibilities clearly delineated to maintain stability. By observing the first rulers and implementing their directives, humans developed political systems capable of coordinating labor, resolving disputes, and sustaining growing populations, while reinforcing the hierarchy and obedience that mirrored the celestial order. Religion and spirituality were deeply integrated with civilization, as the first rulers taught humans to honor the forces that governed life, death, and the natural world. Temples became centers for both worship and education, where humans studied astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and governance alongside ritual practice. Festivals and ceremonies were timed to celestial cycles, connecting the community to a greater cosmic order. Human life, labor, and achievement were framed as part of a sacred system, embedding morality, ethics, and reverence for the first rulers into the fabric of society. Education and mentorship were central to their work, as the first rulers trained individuals who would serve as priests, scholars, and administrators. Humans learned through observation, apprenticeship, and trial, mastering skills in agriculture, engineering, law, and astronomy. These individuals became transmitters of knowledge, ensuring that the wisdom of the first rulers was preserved across generations. Knowledge became a living system, passed down with careful precision, embedding their guidance into the very structures of human thought, governance, and innovation. Art and record-keeping flourished under their influence, as humans created symbols, carvings, murals, and inscriptions that preserved both practical knowledge and sacred teachings. Temples, ziggurats, and monuments were decorated with representations of celestial events, divine interaction, and societal achievements, serving as instruction for those who could interpret the meanings. Writing emerged as a tool to communicate across time, documenting trade, law, history, and ritual, linking humanity to the celestial teachings of the first rulers. Through art and writing, civilization became both tangible and conceptual, allowing knowledge, culture, and authority to endure beyond immediate generations. Military organization and defense were taught as part of their civilization building, as humans learned methods of fortification, strategy, and coordinated defense. Societies were prepared to withstand natural disasters, rival tribes, and internal upheaval. These lessons were not isolated from other aspects of civilization, as agriculture, governance, trade, and religion were integrated with defense, creating cohesive societies capable of long-term survival and expansion. The first rulers ensured that humans understood both the practical and strategic dimensions of civilization, reinforcing resilience, cooperation, and structure. The presence of the first rulers was woven into the perception humans had of themselves, as their guidance elevated both consciousness and capability. Humanity began to see itself as part of a broader order, capable of mastery over nature while remaining connected to celestial principles. Civilization was not a series of accidental achievements, but a collaborative project guided by beings of immense intelligence and authority, whose lessons in governance, architecture, agriculture, astronomy, and culture were internalized into every aspect of human society. The first rulers bestowed upon humanity knowledge that would define civilization for millennia, shaping the ways humans understood the world, the cosmos, and themselves. This knowledge was not merely practical but profoundly transformative, elevating humans from instinct-driven survival to conscious mastery over their environment. They taught the principles of agriculture, explaining the cycles of planting, harvesting, and animal domestication with precision. Humans learned to store surplus food, prepare for seasonal changes, and anticipate natural fluctuations, creating the foundations of permanent settlements. Each lesson was accompanied by demonstration, hands-on instruction, and the embedding of celestial and natural patterns into human practice, allowing communities to thrive in ways previously unimaginable. In addition to agriculture, the first rulers introduced humans to metallurgy, revealing the processes by which raw ore could be extracted, purified, and forged into tools, weapons, and objects of cultural significance. Copper, gold, and later bronze became central to the development of society, not only for their utility, but for their symbolic power. The crafting of metals required precision, patience, and skill, all of which were taught and overseen by the first rulers. These lessons extended beyond technical mastery, embedding values of craftsmanship, foresight, and attention to detail into the societies they shaped. Humans learned that mastery over materials could transform both survival and status, creating hierarchies, professions, and cultural practices grounded in divine knowledge. Astronomy and mathematics were taught as sacred arts, revealing the hidden structures of the cosmos and the natural world. Humans learned to track the movements of celestial bodies, measure time, and calculate the cycles of seasons, eclipses, and planetary alignment. The first rulers instructed humans in geometry, arithmetic, and the principles of proportion, applying these concepts to architecture, land division, and construction. Knowledge of the heavens became a framework for understanding Earth, creating calendars that synchronized agriculture, religious observance, and social activity. The precision of this knowledge ensured that communities could plan ahead, anticipate disasters, and maintain harmony with the rhythms of nature, embedding a cosmic order into the very fabric of human life. Medicine and healing were another domain influenced by the first rulers. Humans were shown how to identify herbs, understand their properties, and apply treatments for both physical and spiritual ailments. The first rulers taught methods of observation, diagnosis, and intervention, establishing practices that would form the foundation of early medical knowledge. Healing was not only practical, but also symbolic, connecting the physical health of humans with spiritual guidance and the understanding of natural forces. Knowledge of anatomy, herbal remedies, and preventative care was transmitted carefully, ensuring that humans could sustain themselves, protect their communities, and interpret the signs of health and disease in ways that reflected divine wisdom. The first rulers also imparted knowledge of governance and law, teaching humans how to organize societies, manage resources, and maintain social cohesion. Laws were not arbitrary rules but structured principles reflecting cosmic order and divine authority. Humans learned to adjudicate disputes, establish hierarchies, and create systems of accountability, allowing communities to thrive while maintaining internal stability. Knowledge of governance extended to administration, record-keeping, and economic management, ensuring that human societies could function efficiently and sustainably. The first rulers emphasized that knowledge of law and social organization was as essential as mastery over land, materials, or celestial observation. Education was formalized under their guidance, with select humans chosen as scribes, priests, and scholars. These individuals became custodians of knowledge, tasked with preserving and transmitting lessons in agriculture, metallurgy, astronomy, medicine, and governance. Apprenticeships, observation, and ritualized learning ensured that knowledge was not lost, and that the values, ethics, and principles of the first rulers were continuously reinforced. This system of mentorship created a hierarchy of wisdom, with humans trained to uphold and expand upon the teachings imparted by beings far beyond mortal capacity. Writing and record-keeping were essential tools provided by the first rulers, enabling humans to document not only transactions and laws, but also myths, astronomical observations, and divine instructions. Through writing, knowledge could survive beyond individual lifespans, preserved across generations and geographic distances. The development of cuneiform, hieroglyphics, and other early scripts reflects this transmission of knowledge, with each symbol, tablet, and inscription containing layers of instruction, guidance, and cosmic awareness. Humans became record keepers, historians, and archivists, ensuring that knowledge was accessible and that the influence of the first rulers would persist in both practical and spiritual dimensions. Beyond technical instruction, the first rulers also shared knowledge of philosophy, ethics, and morality. Humans were taught to discern right from wrong, to understand consequences, and to structure their actions in ways that maintain social harmony and cosmic balance. These lessons were embedded in myths, rituals, and oral tradition, providing a moral framework alongside practical skills. Humans internalized these teachings, creating civilizations that not only survived, but also sought order, justice, and meaning, reflecting the profound influence of beings whose understanding transcended human perception. The transmission of knowledge was often selective, as the first rulers revealed certain lessons only to those deemed ready or worthy. Kings, priests, and scholars received advanced instruction in astronomy, law, and metallurgy, while the broader population was guided in agriculture, social behavior, and ritual practice. This selective sharing created structured hierarchies, reinforced authority, and ensured that knowledge was applied responsibly. Humans learned that wisdom was a gift but also a responsibility, a principle that reinforced the teaching, governance, and oversight of the first rulers. Art, architecture, and ritual practice were intertwined with knowledge, as humans were taught to embody what they learned in physical and symbolic forms. Temples, monuments, and observatories were constructed with precision, reflecting lessons in geometry, astronomy, and social organization. Art preserved knowledge in visual form, encoding instruction, myth, and divine guidance for future generations. The first rulers ensured that civilization itself became a living testament to knowledge, a system where every aspect of human life, agriculture, law, science, ritual, and art reflected the presence and instruction of those who had walked among them. The first rulers established systems of governance that would shape the earliest human civilizations, teaching humans how to rule themselves under the guidance of beings far beyond their comprehension. Humans were organized into hierarchies modeled after the celestial order of the first rulers, with kings, priests, and administrators serving as intermediaries between the divine and the mortal. These rulers were selected for intelligence, loyalty, and the capacity to absorb knowledge, trained to maintain order, enforce law, and ensure the prosperity of their communities. The first rulers closely supervised these mortal leaders, instructing them in both practical administration and the principles of justice that reflected cosmic balance. Kings were more than political figures. They were representatives of the first rulers on earth, tasked with embodying divine authority while managing human affairs. They were taught to govern with both strength and wisdom, balancing the needs of the population with the expectations of their celestial mentors. Rituals, ceremonies, and public displays reinforced the perception of divine legitimacy, ensuring that humans recognized the kings as extensions of the first ruler's will. Leadership was both a privilege and a responsibility, as humans were expected to uphold laws, mediate disputes, and maintain harmony within society, reflecting the order established by beings whose understanding transcended mortality. Priests and scholars played a central role in interpreting and transmitting the teachings of the first rulers, serving as custodians of knowledge, ritual, and law. They were trained to observe celestial patterns, maintain sacred sites, and instruct the population in both practical and spiritual matters. Through their guidance, humans learned not only to follow orders, but to internalize the principles behind them, understanding the connection between governance, morality, and cosmic order. Priests mediated between kings, the populace, and the divine, ensuring that the influence of the first rulers remained integrated into every level of human society. The first rulers also introduced systems of accountability and oversight, demonstrating that leadership required discipline, fairness, and wisdom. Kings and officials were observed, tested, and corrected when necessary, learning through instruction and example how to make decisions that preserved stability and promoted growth. Humans were taught to administer justice, enforce laws, and resolve disputes in ways that mirrored celestial principles, creating a system where morality and governance were inseparable. These lessons ensured that societies could endure, maintain cohesion, and function efficiently while remaining aligned with the wisdom imparted by the first rulers. Military organization was another domain influenced by the first rulers, as humans were taught to defend their communities and maintain order through disciplined strategy and coordination. Armies were organized under the guidance of kings and advisors, with strategies designed to preserve both resources and population. Fortifications, weapons, and defensive planning reflected lessons from the first rulers, ensuring that human societies could survive external threats while reinforcing social hierarchies. Leadership, loyalty, and coordinated action became essential skills embedded into the political and social fabric of civilization, reflecting the broader principles of order and oversight. Education for leaders was rigorous and deliberate, with selected individuals trained intensively in all domains necessary for governance. They learned law, mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and ritual practice, developing the capacity to guide communities while upholding the values and teachings of the first rulers. Apprenticeships, observation, and direct mentorship created a chain of knowledge that ensured continuity across generations, maintaining the integrity of leadership and embedding divine principles into every aspect of administration and decision-making. Humans were also instructed in diplomacy and intercommunity relations, learning to manage alliances, negotiate conflicts, and distribute resources equitably. These skills reflected the larger vision of the first rulers, who understood that human societies would thrive only through cooperation, foresight, and adherence to cosmic principles. Leaders were taught to balance competing interests, maintain fairness, and anticipate challenges, reinforcing the stability and growth of settlements while ensuring that human actions aligned with the guidance of the first rulers. Ceremonial and ritual instruction reinforced the authority of both kings and priests, integrating governance with spirituality. Public rituals celebrated celestial events, honored the first rulers, and demonstrated societal order. Humans learned that leadership was inseparable from ritual practice, that authority was validated not merely through power, but through adherence to sacred patterns, observances, and moral codes. These practices elevated governance beyond administration, making leadership a reflection of divine intention and cosmic harmony. Record-keeping, observation, and documentation were essential for leadership under the first rulers. Kings and priests maintained meticulous accounts of resources, laws, rituals, and astronomical observations, creating archives that preserved knowledge for future generations. Writing, symbols, and inscriptions allowed humans to codify instruction, maintain societal memory, and ensure that the authority of the first rulers remained tangible across time and space. The preservation of knowledge reinforced both governance and culture, creating continuity and stability in civilizations shaped by celestial guidance. The interplay between divine instruction and mortal administration defined the earliest human civilizations, as humans internalized lessons in leadership, law, and societal responsibility. The first rulers' guidance ensured that humans could govern themselves effectively while remaining connected to higher wisdom. Kings, priests, and advisors acted as living embodiments of celestial principles, overseeing agriculture, trade, defense, ritual, and education with oversight from beings whose presence was absolute and transformative. Through this system, society developed resilience, cohesion, and purpose, reflecting the knowledge, authority, and influence of the first rulers. The first rulers not only guided humans in governance and ritual, but also laid the foundations for knowledge that would shape the development of society for generations. They taught humans to observe patterns in nature, to understand the cycles of the sun, moon, and stars, and to apply this understanding to agriculture, architecture, and communal organization. Knowledge became a tool of survival, prosperity, and cultural advancement, and humans were trained to interpret these lessons with precision and discipline. Every action, from planting crops to constructing dwellings, reflected the guidance of the first rulers, embedding their influence into the very structure of human civilization. Humans were instructed in the arts of measurement, geometry, and mathematics, learning principles that enabled them to plan settlements, build monumental structures, and design irrigation systems. These lessons went beyond practical application. They demonstrated the underlying order of the universe and revealed the connections between celestial patterns and earthly life. The first rulers provided humans with knowledge of numbers, ratios, and spatial reasoning, empowering them to create structures that were functional, enduring, and harmonious with natural and cosmic forces. Cities and temples became expressions of this knowledge, monuments to the intelligence and foresight imparted by the rulers who walked among them. Metallurgy and craftsmanship were also central to society building, as humans learned to extract metals, refine them, and forge tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects. The first rulers demonstrated the transformation of raw materials into instruments of productivity and symbols of status. These techniques elevated human capability, creating specialists, artisans, and trade networks that spread knowledge and resources across communities. Craftsmanship became a cultural pillar, linking economic development, social hierarchy, and divine instruction into a cohesive system that reinforced the authority and presence of the first rulers. Trade and communication networks flourished under their guidance, connecting distant settlements and fostering collaboration, exchange, and cultural cohesion. Humans learned to navigate rivers, deserts, and mountain paths while maintaining records of goods and transactions. Markets became hubs not only for material exchange, but also for ideas, customs, and knowledge, spreading the lessons of the first rulers across regions. This interconnection strengthened society, encouraged cooperation, and facilitated the transfer of technology, philosophy, and ritual practices, creating civilizations capable of adaptation and growth across generations. Education was formalized as a cornerstone of society, with the first rulers training priests, scribes, and scholars to carry knowledge forward. Apprenticeships and structured learning ensured that every generation could build upon the previous one, creating a living system of knowledge and culture. Humans were taught to observe carefully, record meticulously, and apply principles accurately, transforming raw information into wisdom that could guide the decisions of rulers, the organization of cities, and the management of resources. This system created continuity, resilience, and cohesion, allowing human societies to function efficiently under complex and often unpredictable conditions. Writing and record-keeping were introduced as essential tools for knowledge preservation and governance. Humans learned to inscribe laws, economic data, historical events, and celestial observations, ensuring that knowledge could endure beyond the lifespan of any individual. Written records became a cornerstone of civilization, enabling centralized administration, the codification of laws, and the teaching of practical and spiritual knowledge. The first rulers emphasized the importance of accurate documentation, ensuring that humans could transmit understanding across generations, creating archives that anchored society in both material and intellectual order. Religion, ritual, and moral instruction were inseparable from societal knowledge under the first rulers. Humans were taught that law, governance, and social responsibility were connected to spiritual principles, reinforcing the idea that society existed within a larger cosmic order. Temples, sacred spaces, and observatories became centers of learning as well as worship, allowing humans to integrate practical skills with spiritual insight. Rituals, festivals, and ceremonies maintained societal cohesion, teaching communities to recognize patterns in nature, honor the first rulers, and align their actions with principles that govern both life and cosmos. Military organization and defense were integral aspects of building knowledge and society. Humans were instructed in strategy, fortification, and coordination, creating armies capable of protecting settlements and maintaining order. Defense was not merely reactive, it was an organized system that mirrored the discipline, hierarchy, and foresight demonstrated by the first rulers. Leaders learned to anticipate threats, allocate resources effectively, and coordinate collective action, ensuring that societies could survive external dangers while sustaining internal stability and growth. Art, architecture, and symbolic expression were essential vehicles for the transmission of knowledge. Humans were taught to encode lessons, history, and instruction in carvings, murals, and monumental design. Every temple, ziggurat, and public space reflected the integration of practical knowledge, ritual practice, and moral teaching, imparted by the first rulers. Artistic expression became a living record, preserving culture, knowledge, and societal values while reinforcing the authority and presence of the rulers who had guided human development. Civilization itself became an ongoing work of both utility and beauty, a reflection of lessons learned from beings of immense intelligence and power. The first rulers' guidance created societies in which knowledge, power, and responsibility were intertwined. Humans learned that mastery over land, resources, and social structures was inseparable from understanding cosmic principles, ethical behavior, and communal obligations. Education, craft, trade, governance, and ritual formed interconnected systems that allowed civilizations to flourish, expand, and endure. Through their instruction, humans internalized patterns, skills, and wisdom that became the foundation of every aspect of organized society, embedding the influence of the first rulers into daily life, cultural practice, and the enduring legacy of human civilization. The first rulers established systems of governance and oversight that ensured the stability of early human civilizations. They were not passive observers. They actively guided rulers, priests, and administrators in maintaining order, resolving disputes, and enforcing laws derived from cosmic principles. Humans learned to recognize the connection between authority and responsibility, understanding that leadership was both a privilege and a sacred duty. The first rulers taught that the stability of society depended on balance, fairness, and the careful application of knowledge, instilling in humans a sense of accountability that transcended personal ambition or desire. Civil law and social regulation were central to the lessons of the first rulers. Humans were instructed in codifying rules, creating systems of justice, and ensuring that societal norms were upheld across communities. These laws were not arbitrary edicts. They reflected principles observed in the natural world and the heavens, connecting morality, governance, and cosmic order. Kings and priests were trained to administer justice impartially, maintaining harmony between individuals, families, and larger social units. Human leaders internalized these lessons, applying them to disputes over land, resources, and social responsibilities, creating societies capable of enduring complexity and conflict. The first rulers also taught humans the importance of infrastructure in maintaining societal order. Roads, canals, and communication networks were designed with purpose, facilitating trade, mobility, and the movement of armies. Settlements were carefully organized to allow efficient governance, resource distribution, and defense. Humans learned that the physical layout of their cities and villages could reinforce authority, ensure stability, and reflect the principles of cosmic order imparted by their celestial mentors. Every structure, pathway, and waterway became an instrument for maintaining societal balance, blending practicality with spiritual guidance. Military strategy and defense were integrated into the teachings of the first rulers, ensuring that human societies could protect themselves from external threats while preserving internal order. Humans were instructed in fortification, coordinated planning, and tactical organization, creating armies that reflected the discipline and foresight of their mentors. Leadership in conflict was framed as both a moral and practical responsibility, emphasizing protection, resource preservation, and collective cohesion. By teaching humans how to defend their communities while maintaining order, the first rulers reinforced the principle that civilization required vigilance, planning, and ethical authority. Religion and ritual served as mechanisms for reinforcing social cohesion and order. Humans were taught to align their activities with celestial events, conduct ceremonies that honored the first rulers, and maintain moral and ethical behavior in accordance with divine principles. Temples became centers of law, education, and governance, integrating spiritual practice with societal regulation. Humans internalized the connection between ritual, morality, and authority, understanding that social order was not merely a function of enforcement, but a reflection of alignment with cosmic and divine principles. Education in administration and observation was essential for maintaining order. The first rulers trained scribes, advisors, and priests to record events, monitor compliance with laws, and interpret celestial and environmental signs. Humans became both keepers of knowledge and enforcers of cosmic alignment, learning to maintain the integrity of their communities through careful observation and application of principles. This system of education ensured continuity across generations, creating societies that could endure despite change, challenge, or disruption. Conflict resolution and diplomacy were central to the first rulers' guidance. Humans learned to mediate disputes between settlements, negotiate resource-sharing agreements, and maintain alliances that strengthened regional stability. Leaders were taught to anticipate tensions, balance competing interests, and enforce agreements with fairness and precision. Through these lessons, humans internalized the principles of negotiation, compromise, and foresight, ensuring that societies could maintain cohesion and order even in times of scarcity or competition. The first rulers also instilled the understanding that order was maintained through knowledge, vigilance, and moral integrity. Humans were instructed to observe patterns in human behavior, nature, and the cosmos, recognizing the interconnections between cause and effect. They were taught that disruptions in order, whether social, environmental, or spiritual, required attention, correction, and restoration. By embedding these principles into governance, ritual, and education, the first rulers ensured that humans could actively sustain societal stability while honoring the cosmic framework from which their authority was derived. Trade and resource management were regulated under the guidance of the first rulers to support societal stability. Humans learned to measure, record, and distribute resources efficiently, preventing conflict and ensuring the survival of communities. Markets, storage facilities, and transport routes were designed to reflect both practicality and the broader principles of cosmic order. Through these systems, humans learned that economic stability was inseparable from governance, moral responsibility, and adherence to the lessons imparted by the first rulers. Every aspect of human civilization, from leadership and law to trade, ritual, and defense, was infused with the guidance of the first rulers. Their oversight created structures, principles, and systems that allowed societies to thrive, adapt, and endure across generations. Humans internalized patterns of authority, justice, and cosmic alignment, forming civilizations that reflected both practical intelligence and spiritual wisdom. The influence of the first rulers permeated every domain of human life, ensuring that knowledge, power, and order were inseparable in the early development of society. The first rulers were the ultimate architects of early human civilization, guiding humanity in the creation of structures, settlements, and cities that reflected both practical needs and cosmic principles. Humans were taught to plan their communities with precision, ensuring that homes, temples, and public spaces aligned with natural landscapes, celestial patterns, and social hierarchies. The first rulers emphasized that architecture was not merely functional, it was symbolic, reflecting order, balance, and the presence of divine authority. Each building, road, and irrigation channel was designed to serve multiple purposes: practical, spiritual, and social, embedding lessons of foresight, planning, and responsibility into the very fabric of human society. Agriculture and land management were central to their architectural teachings. Humans learned to construct terraces, canals, and reservoirs that optimized water flow and soil fertility, transforming barren or unpredictable terrain into productive land. These systems required careful observation, measurement, and coordination, with each community member contributing to maintenance and expansion. The first rulers demonstrated the importance of integrating human activity with natural forces, showing that sustainable agriculture was a cornerstone of thriving civilizations. By teaching these techniques, they ensured that settlements could support growing populations and endure environmental challenges over centuries. Urban planning was another domain where their influence was profound. Humans were instructed to organize settlements in ways that promoted social cohesion, efficient governance, and access to resources. Streets, marketplaces, administrative centers, and sacred spaces were designed according to both practical and cosmic principles, ensuring that every aspect of community life reflected order. The first rulers demonstrated that a well-planned city could reinforce authority, facilitate trade, and nurture cultural development, embedding lessons of discipline, foresight, and collaboration into human society. Architecture became a living classroom, a place where knowledge, skill, and spiritual insight converged. Construction techniques were carefully taught and supervised by the first rulers. Humans learned to quarry stone, shape timber, and craft durable building materials, mastering principles of weight distribution, balance, and durability. These skills allowed humans to build monumental structures that endured for generations, from temples and palaces to bridges and defensive walls. Every construction project was both practical and symbolic, teaching humans that engineering, artistry, and ritual were interconnected. By observing and assisting the first rulers, humans internalized advanced techniques that far exceeded the capabilities of unassisted development, elevating the level of civilization on Earth. Monumental architecture served as both a functional and spiritual expression of the first rulers' guidance. Temples, ziggurats, and observatories were designed to align with stars, solstices, and planetary cycles, connecting human activity with the rhythms of the cosmos. Humans were instructed in proportions, symmetry, and spatial reasoning, creating structures that were not only stable and enduring, but also harmonious with celestial and environmental forces. These monumental constructions reinforced the authority of rulers, codified social and religious practices, and communicated knowledge across generations, acting as both centers of learning and symbols of divine influence. The first rulers also emphasized infrastructure as a tool for societal cohesion. Roads, bridges, canals, and aqueducts were constructed to connect settlements, facilitate trade, and ensure mobility in both peace and conflict. Humans learned the principles of engineering, surveying, and resource management required to build and maintain these systems, creating networks that enabled communication, commerce, and cultural exchange. Infrastructure became a practical reflection of knowledge, coordination, and foresight, reinforcing the idea that civilization required both planning and cooperation, guided by the wisdom of the first rulers. Water management was a critical aspect of their architectural teachings. Humans were instructed to construct reservoirs, dams, and irrigation channels that optimized the availability of fresh water while controlling floods and erosion. These projects demanded collaboration, careful measurement, and ongoing maintenance, embedding lessons of collective responsibility and long-term planning into human communities. Water systems supported agriculture, domestic use, and ceremonial needs, demonstrating the interdependence of practical necessity and societal stability. The first rulers' guidance ensured that water, one of the most vital resources, was managed with precision, foresight, and respect. Social spaces and public buildings were designed to facilitate governance, education, and ritual practice. Humans learned to create administrative centers, schools, and temples that served multiple functions, integrating law, commerce, and spiritual observance into communal life. Architecture became a tool for social organization, reflecting hierarchies, responsibilities, and communal priorities. The first rulers taught that the physical layout of settlements could influence behavior, enforce order, and encourage collaboration, embedding the principles of cosmic and societal harmony into the daily lives of humans. Defensive architecture was also an essential aspect of civilization building. Humans were instructed to build walls, fortifications, and strategic lookout points to protect communities from natural and human threats. The first rulers demonstrated the importance of preparedness, observation, and strategic planning. Linking military knowledge with urban design, defensive structures were carefully integrated into settlements, serving both protective and symbolic functions. Humans learned that security, organization, and foresight were interconnected, and that the resilience of civilization depended on careful planning and the application of knowledge imparted by the first rulers. Every aspect of architecture, infrastructure, and urban planning reflected the guidance of the first rulers. Humans internalized lessons in precision, foresight, and harmony, applying these principles to agriculture, governance, defense, and spiritual practice. Civilization became a manifestation of both practical skill and cosmic alignment, a system where knowledge, authority, and societal order converged. Through their teachings, the first rulers ensured that humans could build structures, networks, and communities that would endure, thrive, and reflect the influence of beings whose wisdom transcended time and mortality. The first rulers established the earliest systems of law, teaching humans that societal stability depended on adherence to structured rules and principles derived from both practical necessity and cosmic order. Humans were instructed to recognize the consequences of actions, maintain fairness in disputes, and respect the authority of leaders chosen for their wisdom and alignment with celestial guidance. These laws were not imposed arbitrarily. They reflected patterns observed in nature, the cycles of the heavens, and the ethical standards modeled by the first rulers. By internalizing these principles, humans learned that justice and order were inseparable from the survival and growth of civilization. Codification of law became a central tool for governance under the first rulers. Humans were trained to record regulations, rulings, and agreements, ensuring that knowledge of justice persisted across time and generations. Written decrees and inscribed tablets provided tangible references for rulers, administrators, and the population, reinforcing the authority of leadership and the integrity of societal systems. The first rulers demonstrated that the act of recording laws was itself a reflection of wisdom, foresight, and divine alignment, embedding the principles of accountability and consistency into the very framework of human governance. Dispute resolution and conflict management were taught as essential skills for both leaders and communities. Humans learned methods to mediate disagreements, assess evidence, and enforce resolutions that balanced fairness with the collective good. The first rulers emphasized that maintaining order required impartiality, careful observation, and understanding of underlying causes rather than reactive punishment alone. By instilling these principles, humans were prepared to handle internal tensions and competing interests while preserving harmony and societal cohesion. Social hierarchies were structured to reinforce law and order, as humans were instructed to respect roles, responsibilities, and chains of authority established under the guidance of the first rulers. Kings, priests, and advisors served as both enforcers and interpreters of laws, creating a system in which governance, morality, and societal function were deeply intertwined. Humans learned that authority was justified not only by power, but by adherence to ethical principles, knowledge, and guidance from those who had walked among them. These hierarchies allowed communities to maintain stability, allocate resources efficiently, and organize collective efforts for construction, defense, and trade. Trade regulation and economic oversight were integrated into the systems of law introduced by the first rulers. Humans were taught to record transactions, manage resources, and resolve commercial disputes with fairness and transparency. Markets, storage facilities, and trade routes were structured according to rules that ensured equitable distribution, prevented conflict, and supported societal growth. The first rulers demonstrated that law applied to commerce as much as governance or ritual, reinforcing the idea that stability and prosperity depended on consistent application of knowledge and ethical standards. Education in law and governance was formalized, with selected humans trained as scribes, judges, and advisors. These individuals became custodians of legal knowledge, responsible for preserving records, interpreting laws, and advising leaders on both practical and moral considerations. Apprenticeships and mentorship ensured continuity, creating a lineage of knowledge that allowed legal principles to persist despite changes in leadership or societal pressures. Humans internalized the connections between law, morality, and cosmic alignment, understanding that governance was both a practical and sacred duty. The first rulers also taught the integration of law with ritual and morality, emphasizing that ethical behavior reinforced societal stability. Humans learned to observe customs, participate in ceremonies, and uphold moral codes that reflected both divine instruction and practical necessity. Temples and sacred spaces often served as courts and centers of administration, where justice, ritual, and instruction intersected. Through these practices, humans were trained to view law as an extension of cosmic order, ensuring that obedience, fairness, and accountability were connected to both spiritual and material survival. Military law and discipline were included in the governance systems established by the first rulers. Humans were instructed in chain of command, ethical conduct in conflict, and strategic decision-making, creating armies capable of protecting communities while maintaining internal cohesion. Leaders learned to balance authority with responsibility, using both enforcement and guidance to uphold law, prevent chaos, and ensure that defense was consistent with the principles of order imparted by their mentors. Military structure reinforced the broader societal systems, connecting security, governance, and morality into an integrated framework. Record-keeping and documentation were essential for maintaining law across regions and generations. Humans were taught to track property, monitor agreements, and record precedents, creating systems of accountability and continuity. Written law ensured that disputes could be resolved with reference to established standards, preventing arbitrary decisions and reinforcing social cohesion. The first rulers' emphasis on recording and codifying legal knowledge provided humans with tools for long-term stability, embedding principles of fairness, predictability, and authority into the daily operation of societies. The influence of the first rulers on law and order extended beyond the immediate structures of governance, embedding patterns of ethical reasoning, social responsibility, and cosmic alignment into the consciousness of humans. Leaders, priests, and citizens internalized the importance of accountability, balance, and fairness, creating societies capable of resilience, growth, and continuity. Civilization became a living system in which law, morality, education, and ritual were interconnected, reflecting the guidance, wisdom, and oversight of the first rulers in every aspect of human life. The first rulers guided humans in mastering knowledge and craft, revealing the techniques and principles that would elevate civilization to levels previously unimaginable. They demonstrated how observation, precision, and ingenuity could transform raw materials into tools, structures, and instruments capable of reshaping the world. Humans learned that skill alone was insufficient. Mastery required understanding, discipline, and alignment with natural and cosmic principles. Every craft, whether in agriculture, metallurgy, or construction, was an expression of knowledge imparted by beings whose intellect and foresight exceeded mortal comprehension. Metallurgy was a cornerstone of their instruction, as humans were taught to extract metals from ore, refine them, and forge implements that would serve practical, ceremonial, and symbolic purposes. Copper, bronze, and gold became central to technological development and social hierarchy, with artisans carefully trained to respect both material and process. The first rulers emphasized precision, durability, and aesthetic harmony, showing that mastery of materials reflected mastery of knowledge itself. These lessons created specialized craftspeople, guilds, and trade networks that disseminated skill, wealth, and culture across regions. Stonework and architecture were elevated under the guidance of the first rulers. Humans learned to quarry, shape, and assemble stones with advanced techniques that allowed the construction of temples, fortifications, and monuments. Geometry, measurement, and proportion were integrated into design, ensuring that structures were both functional and symbolically aligned with celestial patterns. These architectural feats required collaboration, planning, and technical knowledge, teaching humans the value of coordination, foresight, and precision. Through these lessons, human settlements became centers of civilization, reflecting both the practical guidance and divine influence of the first rulers. Art and symbolism were essential aspects of craft taught by the first rulers. Humans learned to encode knowledge, history, and ritual practice in visual forms, such as carvings, murals, and statues. Artistic expression became a repository of cultural memory, preserving lessons in governance, astronomy, morality, and social organization. Every stroke, engraving, and architectural embellishment carried layers of meaning, ensuring that knowledge endured across generations. The first rulers demonstrated that craft was not merely functional, but a bridge between the practical and the spiritual, integrating skill, beauty, and wisdom. Textiles, pottery, and domestic crafts were also developed under their guidance. Humans learned to weave fibers, mold clay, and create household items with precision and artistry, elevating everyday life through skill and innovation. These crafts served practical purposes, supported trade, and reflected cultural identity, teaching humans that mastery extended beyond monumental achievements to daily existence. Through these practices, the first rulers reinforced the principle that knowledge and skill were interconnected, and that every human activity could reflect cosmic order and divine guidance. Trade and the transmission of craft knowledge were central to the first rulers' strategy for civilization building. Humans were instructed to share skills, materials, and techniques across settlements, creating networks that encouraged cooperation, cultural exchange, and technological advancement. Trade routes became conduits not only for goods, but for ideas, allowing innovations in metallurgy, architecture, and ritual practice to spread rapidly. The first rulers showed that interconnected knowledge strengthened societies, ensuring resilience, growth, and the preservation of wisdom. Mathematics and measurement were integrated into every craft under their supervision. Humans learned to calculate dimensions, proportions, and ratios accurately, applying these principles to construction, irrigation, and trade. Precision became a hallmark of civilization, with the first rulers emphasizing that knowledge without exact application could lead to failure or disorder. Humans internalized the connection between theory and practice, understanding that careful observation and meticulous calculation were essential for sustainable, harmonious communities. Ritual and craft were inseparable in the teachings of the first rulers. Humans were trained to embed spiritual meaning into tools, structures, and artworks, reinforcing the link between practical skill and divine order. Ceremonial objects, temple constructions, and architectural alignments served both functional and symbolic purposes, teaching humans that mastery of craft reflected moral and cosmic understanding. Knowledge, skill, and spirituality were interwoven, creating a civilization where daily life, governance, and worship were integrated into a coherent, structured system. Innovation was encouraged under the guidance of the first rulers, as humans were challenged to experiment with techniques, materials, and designs. Failures were opportunities for observation and correction, while successes were celebrated as evidence of alignment with cosmic principles. This culture of learning, experimentation, and refinement allowed civilizations to advance rapidly, building knowledge upon knowledge, skill upon skill, and creating enduring traditions of craftsmanship, architecture, and science. Through their instruction in knowledge and craft, the first rulers ensured that humans could transform the natural world, elevate daily life, and express cultural identity through skill, artistry, and ingenuity. Civilizations became living embodiments of wisdom, structure, and creativity, reflecting both practical mastery and the influence of beings whose presence shaped humanity in ways that would endure for millennia. Every tool, structure, and artwork carried the imprint of their guidance, ensuring that the legacy of the first rulers permeated every aspect of human life and cultural development. The first rulers ensured that knowledge was preserved and transmitted across generations, establishing humans as keepers of wisdom and civilization. They selected individuals with exceptional memory, discipline, and dedication to act as scribes, scholars, and priests, teaching them to observe, record, and interpret both natural and divine phenomena. Humans learned that knowledge was sacred, a gift from beings whose insight far exceeded mortal comprehension. The careful preservation of this wisdom allowed early civilizations to survive environmental challenges, maintain social cohesion, and advance in agriculture, governance, and technology. Record keeping was one of the most vital practices imparted by the first rulers. Humans were taught to document events, laws, trade, and astronomical observations, using writing systems carefully developed under divine guidance. Tablets, scrolls, and inscriptions became repositories of human and divine knowledge, enabling communities to learn from the past, coordinate resources, and govern effectively. The first rulers emphasized accuracy and consistency, demonstrating that records were tools for both practical administration and spiritual alignment. Knowledge written down could endure beyond individual lifespans, ensuring continuity and stability across generations. Education and mentorship were central to sustaining civilizations under the guidance of the first rulers. Selected humans were trained to pass knowledge on to apprentices, creating a chain of learning that connected past, present, and future. Humans learned not only facts and techniques, but also the principles underlying them, internalizing lessons in governance, ethics, craft, and science. Through this system, the first rulers embedded a culture of curiosity, observation, and application, transforming humans into active participants in the preservation and advancement of civilization. The first rulers also taught humans to organize and maintain libraries, archives, and repositories of knowledge. These centers became the heart of learning, housing records of law, astronomy, medicine, and ritual. Humans were trained to catalog, preserve, and protect these resources, understanding that the survival of civilization depended on the careful stewardship of information. Through these practices, early societies developed sophisticated methods of administration and education, ensuring that wisdom remained accessible, structured, and reliable. Religious institutions and sacred spaces were intertwined with the keeping of knowledge. Temples and observatories became centers where education, ritual, and observation converged. Humans were instructed to observe celestial patterns, conduct ceremonies, and interpret divine signs, linking spiritual understanding with practical knowledge. The first rulers emphasized that intellectual, moral, and spiritual education were inseparable, teaching humans that maintaining civilization required both cognitive skill and ethical conduct. Agricultural knowledge was preserved through careful observation, record-keeping, and oral instruction. Humans were taught to monitor seasonal changes, soil fertility, and crop cycles, applying lessons in irrigation, planting, and harvest management. The first rulers demonstrated the importance of anticipating natural fluctuations, ensuring food security and societal stability. Humans learned that agricultural expertise was foundational to civilization, requiring both practical skill and understanding of the larger patterns governing life on Earth. Metallurgical and craft knowledge was also carefully maintained. Humans were trained to document techniques in forging, shaping, and constructing with metal, wood, and stone. Craftsmanship was elevated beyond mere utility, becoming a vehicle for cultural continuity, technological advancement, and spiritual expression. The first rulers emphasized that mastery of materials reflected mastery of knowledge, instilling values of patience, precision, and creativity that were preserved across generations. Law and governance were codified and safeguarded by humans under the direction of the first rulers. Legal principles, codes, and precedents were meticulously recorded, ensuring continuity and fairness in administration. Humans were trained to interpret and apply laws consistently, balancing justice with ethical principles. Governance became a disciplined practice that connected authority, morality, and knowledge, reinforcing social cohesion while reflecting the cosmic order imparted by the first rulers. Trade, commerce, and resource management were recorded and monitored to support the stability of civilizations. Humans learned to track transactions, inventory, and exchanges, ensuring accountability and equitable distribution of goods. The first rulers demonstrated that economic knowledge was critical to societal endurance, linking prosperity to ethical practice, observation, and careful record-keeping. By maintaining these systems, humans became custodians not only of material wealth, but of the principles that allowed civilization to function effectively. Through these practices, humans became keepers of knowledge, preserving the teachings of the first rulers while adapting them to the growth and complexity of civilization. Every record, ritual, structure, and craft reflected their guidance, creating societies that could endure, innovate, and maintain order. The first rulers ensured that the continuity of wisdom, skill, and morality was embedded in the very foundations of human culture, allowing knowledge to guide the development of cities, governance, science, and spiritual practice across generations. The first rulers taught humans to construct cities and temples that reflected both practical needs and divine inspiration. Blending functionality with sacred symbolism, humans were instructed to align buildings with celestial patterns, waterways, and the surrounding landscape, creating settlements that facilitated governance, commerce, and social cohesion. Every city was meticulously planned, from streets and marketplaces to administrative centers and residential districts. The first rulers emphasized that architecture was more than shelter. It was an embodiment of order, morality, and the principles of cosmic balance, reflecting their presence in every aspect of human life. Temples became the heart of both spiritual and civic life, serving as centers of ritual, governance, and education. Humans learned to build monumental structures using stone, timber, and metal, integrating design principles that ensured durability and aesthetic harmony. Each temple was oriented to celestial events, marking solstices, equinoxes, and planetary cycles, linking human activity to the rhythms of the cosmos. The first rulers demonstrated that sacred architecture could reinforce authority, preserve knowledge, and unify communities through shared purpose, creating spaces that embodied both physical and spiritual order. Urban planning was a crucial component of their instruction. Humans were taught to design cities that optimized resource management, transportation, and defense, while reflecting social hierarchy and community values. Streets, aqueducts, granaries, and marketplaces were strategically positioned to facilitate trade, communication, and administrative control. The first rulers emphasized that the layout of a city was a reflection of the civilization's intelligence, foresight, and adherence to cosmic principles, instilling a sense of discipline and purpose into every aspect of urban life. Construction techniques were carefully imparted to humans, who were trained to quarry, shape, and assemble building materials with precision. Masonry, carpentry, and metalwork were taught as integrated disciplines, ensuring that structures were both functional and enduring. The first rulers demonstrated advanced engineering principles, including weight distribution, leverage, and structural integrity, elevating human capacity to create monumental works. These lessons extended beyond technical skill, embedding values of patience, collaboration, and observation into the process of building civilization. Water management and irrigation were essential lessons in city building. Humans learned to construct canals, reservoirs, and aqueducts that sustained agriculture, supported daily life, and protected settlements from flooding. The first rulers emphasized that controlling water was fundamental to survival, governance, and societal stability. By teaching humans to observe natural flow patterns, calculate capacity, and distribute resources efficiently, they ensured that cities could endure environmental challenges while maintaining prosperity and cohesion. Defense and security were integrated into urban design under the guidance of the first rulers. Humans were instructed to build walls, fortifications, gates, and strategic lookout points that protected populations and maintained internal order. Military knowledge was combined with architecture, teaching humans to anticipate threats, manage resources, and coordinate collective defense. The presence of defensive structures reinforced societal stability, projecting both authority and security, while ensuring that settlements could withstand external pressures without compromising internal harmony. Art and symbolism were interwoven with architecture, reflecting the cultural and spiritual identity of each city. Humans were trained to incorporate carvings, murals, statues, and ceremonial spaces that encoded knowledge, history, and religious principles. Every artistic element served a dual purpose: to beautify and inspire, and to preserve wisdom and societal values. The first rulers demonstrated that civilization required aesthetic as well as functional mastery, creating cities that were both visually striking and structurally sound, with lessons in art and design embedded into daily life. Education and training in construction and urban planning were formalized to ensure continuity. Selected humans apprenticed under skilled builders, engineers, and priests, learning both technical skills and the underlying principles that governed harmonious design. Knowledge was transmitted through observation, hands-on practice, and instruction, creating generations of humans capable of sustaining and expanding cities. The first rulers emphasized that this training was essential for civilization, linking skill, responsibility, and moral understanding in every human endeavor. Temples and civic structures were also centers for the preservation and dissemination of knowledge. Humans were instructed to maintain archives, record astronomical observations, and conduct rituals that reinforced cosmic understanding. These structures became hubs of learning, governance, and spiritual guidance, reflecting the integrated vision of the first rulers. Cities, therefore, were not only habitats, but living systems where architecture, education, governance, and ritual were interconnected, ensuring that civilization thrived under the guidance of divine authority. The influence of the first rulers on city building extended beyond practical design and construction. Humans internalized lessons in foresight, planning, and communal responsibility, understanding that the layout and organization of settlements reflected values, cosmic alignment, and societal cohesion. Civilization became a tangible manifestation of their guidance, with every temple, roadway, and fortified wall echoing the wisdom and presence of beings whose knowledge transcended mortality. Humans became active participants in the creation and maintenance of complex societies, ensuring that cities and temples endured as centers of culture, knowledge, and divine connection. The first rulers introduced humans to agriculture as a structured, deliberate practice, transforming survival into sustained prosperity. Humans were taught to observe seasonal patterns, soil conditions, and water cycles, understanding the relationship between the land, climate, and the growth of crops. The first rulers demonstrated techniques for planting, irrigation, and crop rotation, showing how careful planning could maximize yield and prevent famine. This instruction elevated agriculture from instinctual labor to a systematic science, teaching humans that mastery over the land was essential for societal stability, population growth, and the creation of permanent settlements. Humans learned the cultivation of staple crops, as well as specialty plants for medicine, ritual, and trade. The first rulers provided knowledge of seed selection, soil enrichment, and harvesting methods, ensuring that agricultural practices were sustainable and productive. Techniques were adapted to local climates and resources, demonstrating the importance of observation, experimentation, and adaptation. By understanding both the biological and environmental principles underlying cultivation, humans were able to increase food security, support growing populations, and create surplus for trade, all under the guidance and oversight of the first rulers. Irrigation and water management were central to their teachings. Humans were instructed to construct canals, dams, and reservoirs, regulating water supply to fields, settlements, and gardens. The first rulers emphasized efficiency, foresight, and communal collaboration in these projects, ensuring that every human contribution reinforced societal stability. Through observation of rivers, rainfall, and seasonal changes, humans learned to predict water availability, prevent soil erosion, and optimize crop growth. Water systems became not only practical infrastructure, but also symbols of order, coordination, and the integration of human activity with natural cycles. The first rulers also taught humans about animal domestication, introducing techniques for breeding, feeding, and managing livestock. Humans were shown how animals could provide food, labor, clothing, and companionship, while contributing to the ecological balance of agricultural systems. Knowledge of breeding, veterinary care, and herding techniques was passed down through apprenticeships and direct instruction, ensuring that human-animal relationships supported both survival and societal structure. Livestock became central to trade, ritual, and economic stability, reflecting the wisdom of the first rulers in integrating biological knowledge into civilization. Scientific observation was a core principle in their teaching. Humans were trained to monitor plant growth, weather patterns, and environmental changes, recording data and interpreting signs that guided agricultural decisions. This practice fostered early experimentation, innovation, and predictive understanding of natural phenomena. Humans learned to approach agriculture with analytical rigor, combining empirical observation with the cosmic principles imparted by the first rulers. Knowledge became both practical and philosophical, embedding a scientific mindset into human culture that would influence medicine, construction, and governance. The first rulers also demonstrated the importance of storage, preservation, and resource management. Humans were taught to create granaries, silos, and storage pits that protected food from spoilage, pests, and environmental hazards. Techniques of drying, fermenting, and packaging were introduced to ensure the longevity of harvests. This knowledge not only safeguarded survival, but also facilitated trade, taxation, and communal planning. Humans internalized the principle that stewardship of resources was a moral and practical responsibility, connecting agriculture to governance, societal stability, and ethical conduct. Medicine and botanical knowledge were closely linked to agriculture. The first rulers instructed humans in the properties of plants, herbs, and minerals, demonstrating how they could be used for healing, ritual, and food supplementation. Humans learned to observe effects, experiment cautiously, and apply remedies in practical and ceremonial contexts. This early integration of science, observation, and spirituality laid the foundation for medicine, pharmacology, and holistic understanding of human and environmental health. Agricultural knowledge was inseparable from these practices, creating a comprehensive system of survival, prosperity, and wisdom. Trade and surplus management were taught as extensions of agricultural knowledge. Humans were trained to calculate yields, distribute food, and engage in exchange between communities, establishing networks that supported both economic growth and diplomatic relationships. The first rulers emphasized fairness, measurement, and record-keeping, ensuring that surplus contributed to societal cohesion rather than conflict. Agricultural mastery thus became a cornerstone of civilization, linking food production with governance, commerce, and cosmic order. Education in agriculture and science was formalized under the guidance of the first rulers. Humans selected for aptitude and dedication became instructors, passing knowledge to apprentices and wider communities. Observation, experimentation, and practical application were combined with ritual and moral teaching, ensuring that knowledge was both preserved and continually refined. Through this system, agriculture and science became enduring pillars of civilization, reflecting the foresight, wisdom, and transformative presence of the first rulers in human development. The influence of the first rulers on agriculture and science extended beyond practical instruction. Humans internalized principles of observation, precision, experimentation, and responsibility, understanding that their survival and societal growth were intimately tied to knowledge, skill, and ethical practice. Civilization became a living laboratory, where every field, canal, and livestock herd reflected the integration of practical wisdom and cosmic guidance. Through their teachings, the first rulers ensured that humans could sustain, expand, and innovate, embedding the seeds of scientific thought and agricultural mastery into the foundation of human history. The first rulers were not only teachers of practical skills and governance, but also masters of ritual and sacred knowledge, ensuring that humans understood the interconnectedness of life, the cosmos, and divine authority. Humans were trained to conduct ceremonies that aligned with celestial events, honored the principles of order, and reinforced societal cohesion. Rituals became a medium through which knowledge, morality, and spiritual understanding were transmitted, teaching humans that obedience, reverence, and precision in practice were essential to maintaining harmony between the earthly and the divine. These ceremonies were not mere tradition, they were practical lessons in cosmic alignment, social responsibility, and moral conduct. Humans learned that sacred spaces, whether temples, altars, or observatories, served as centers of both spiritual and intellectual activity. The first rulers demonstrated the alignment of architecture, astronomy, and ritual, showing that observing the heavens and performing ceremonial acts were intertwined with understanding time, seasons, and social order. Knowledge encoded in ritual and sacred space reinforced governance, education, and morality, allowing humans to internalize cosmic principles through experience and practice. These lessons ensured that society was both spiritually guided and intellectually enriched, embedding order and wisdom into every facet of communal life. Priests, scribes, and designated humans were trained as intermediaries, responsible for preserving, interpreting, and teaching sacred knowledge. They studied celestial patterns, maintained calendars, and conducted rituals with exacting precision, ensuring that spiritual practice reflected divine instruction. The first rulers emphasized that accuracy, discipline, and understanding were paramount, teaching that improper observance could disrupt both societal and cosmic balance. Through mentorship and careful apprenticeship, humans became keepers of ritual knowledge, connecting generations through structured practice and shared wisdom. Rituals also conveyed moral and ethical principles, guiding humans in behavior, leadership, and communal responsibilities. Ceremonies reinforced concepts of justice, fairness, and responsibility, showing that societal stability was inseparable from spiritual alignment. The first rulers demonstrated through ritual that leadership required both practical skill and moral integrity, ensuring that kings, priests, and advisors acted with foresight, humility, and adherence to cosmic law. Humans internalized these lessons, understanding that ritual was a living expression of the principles governing both the world and their own conduct. Sacred knowledge extended to astronomy, mathematics, and natural observation, with humans trained to record and interpret celestial events. The first rulers emphasized that understanding the heavens was not merely for prediction, but for aligning human activity with universal patterns. Humans learned to integrate observation into agricultural cycles, navigation, governance, and ceremonial practice. Knowledge gained through ritual and observation was codified in written records, charts, and monuments, ensuring that wisdom could endure across generations. In this way, ritual became both a spiritual and scientific practice, bridging mortal understanding with divine insight. Initiation and apprenticeship were central to the transmission of ritual knowledge. Selected humans were gradually introduced to increasingly complex ceremonies, ethical teachings, and practical applications of sacred knowledge. The first rulers demonstrated the importance of patience, observation, and mentorship, ensuring that every apprentice could eventually sustain, interpret, and expand upon the knowledge imparted. This structured system of learning created continuity, discipline, and expertise, allowing civilizations to maintain cohesion while fostering intellectual and spiritual growth. The first rulers also demonstrated the connection between ritual, civic life, and governance. Humans learned to conduct ceremonies that marked seasonal cycles, public festivals, and transitions of power, embedding cosmic order into civic routines. Through these practices, the population was reminded of the presence and authority of the first rulers, reinforcing social hierarchies and communal responsibilities. Rituals served as both instruction and reinforcement, teaching humans the values of cooperation, respect, and ethical participation in society. Art, music, and symbolic expression were integrated into ritual practice, allowing humans to encode knowledge, history, and spiritual principles in tangible forms. Carvings, murals, ceremonial instruments, and sacred objects reflected lessons in morality, cosmology, and craftsmanship, preserving knowledge visually and orally. The first rulers taught that artistry was inseparable from ritual, demonstrating that creative expression could communicate complex ideas, elevate understanding, and connect generations to the divine. Every crafted object, every melody, and every ceremonial movement reinforced knowledge while honoring cosmic order. Education in ritual and knowledge was continuous, linking past, present, and future. Humans were trained to observe, document, and refine ceremonies, ensuring that sacred practices evolved while preserving the principles of the first rulers. Knowledge once transmitted became a living system, adapting to new circumstances while maintaining continuity and fidelity to foundational teachings. This ensured that civilization could grow without losing connection to the moral, ethical, and cosmic wisdom imparted by the first rulers. Through their mastery of ritual and sacred knowledge, the first rulers ensured that humans internalized principles of cosmic alignment, morality, and social responsibility. Civilization became a living reflection of these teachings, where governance, education, craft, and spiritual practice were inseparable. Humans learned that wisdom required observation, discipline, and reverence, and that the preservation and application of sacred knowledge were essential to maintaining order, prosperity, and connection with the divine. Every ritual, temple, and ceremonial act carried the imprint of the first rulers, ensuring that their guidance remained at the heart of human civilization.